Moving into a new house is supposed to be an exciting experience, a fresh start filled with hope and anticipation. But for my family, the new beginning we had dreamed of quickly turned into a nightmare we couldn't escape. It all began when we found the perfect house, a charming, two-story colonial nestled in a quiet neighborhood. It was a place that felt like home the moment we stepped inside, with its warm, inviting atmosphere and a sense of history that hung in the air. As we settled in, we began to discover the previous owner's belongings left behind, old furniture, forgotten books, and an assortment of boxes in the attic. Among those boxes, we stumbled upon a series of old audio recordings, dusty and long forgotten. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to listen to the recordings one evening when the house was shrouded in darkness. The first few recordings were innocuous, a woman's voice narrating mundane details of daily life. But as I listened further, a chill crept up my spine. The woman's voice became strained and fearful, her words filled with a growing sense of dread. She spoke of strange occurrences in the house, whispers in the night, shadowy figures moving in the corners of her vision, and an oppressive feeling of being watched. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as I listened to her accounts. It was as if the house itself had absorbed her fear, and her voice seemed to echo through the walls, a haunting reminder of her torment. The recordings continued, each one more unsettling than the last. The woman spoke of doors slamming shut on their own, furniture moving by itself, and unexplained cold spots that seemed to defy reason. Her voice trembled as she described the feeling of an unseen presence in every room, a malevolent force that seemed to feed on her fear. It was clear that the woman had been driven to the brink of madness by the relentless hauntings, and I couldn't help but wonder why she had stayed in the house for so long. Her desperation was palpable in her voice, a sense of hopelessness that seemed to seep into my very soul. As I continued to listen, I heard her voice grow fainter, as if she were whispering her final words in the darkness. She spoke of a ritual, a desperate attempt to rid the house of the malevolent presence that had taken hold. The ritual involved a series of incantations and offerings, an act of desperation in the face of unimaginable horror. But it was clear that the ritual had failed, as the woman's voice grew weaker and more frantic with each recording. The final recording was a mere whisper, a desperate plea for help that sent shivers down my spine. It was clear that the woman had been consumed by the malevolent force that had haunted the house, her soul trapped in a never-ending nightmare. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in the house, that the malevolent presence described in the recording still lingered, hungry and vengeful. I shared my discovery with my family, but they dismissed it as superstition, attributing the woman's experiences to a troubled mind. But I knew better. I could feel the weight of her fear and desperation in every room, the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to close in around us. The house had become a prison, and I feared that we were its unwitting prisoners. As days turned into weeks, the hauntings in the house became more pronounced. Objects would move on their own. Strange shadows would flicker in the corners of our vision, and an eerie, whispered voice would fill the silence of the night. I began to conduct research into the history of the house, uncovering a trail of tragedy and death that seemed to stretch back centuries. It was as if the malevolent presence had been a part of the house for generations, a force that could not be easily vanquished. Desperate to find answers, I reached out to paranormal experts, hoping that they could help us rid the house of the malevolent force. They conducted investigations, using equipment to detect paranormal activity and attempting to communicate with whatever entity inhabited the house. During one particularly intense investigation, we captured an EVP, a chilling voice that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. It spoke in a language we couldn't understand, but its tone was unmistakably malevolent, a sinister presence that seemed to revel in our fear. The paranormal experts concluded that the house was indeed haunted by a malevolent entity, one that was deeply rooted in the house's history. They suggested a series of rituals and cleansings, but the entity seemed to grow more powerful with each attempt to banish it. As the hauntings intensified, my family's skepticism turned to fear. We couldn't deny the reality of the malevolent presence any longer, and we began to fear for our safety. The house had become a living nightmare, a place of darkness and terror that we could not escape. In our darkest moments, I couldn't help but wonder if the woman from the audio recordings had left behind a piece of herself in the house, a fragment of her tormented soul that was now intertwined with the malevolent entity. We made the painful decision to leave the house, to abandon the place that had once felt like home but had become a prison of despair. As we packed our belongings and prepared to move, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss and sadness for the woman who had endured the house's horrors for so long. As we drove away from the house for the last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that the malevolent presence still lingered, a malevolent force that would haunt the house for generations to come. The recordings had hinted at a dark and deadly secret from the past, and I couldn't help but wonder if the truth had been buried with the woman who had suffered so profoundly in its grip. The house would forever be a place of mystery and malevolence, a place where the echoes of fear and despair would never truly fade away. And as we left it behind, I couldn't help but hope that the woman from the audio recordings had finally found the peace and release that had eluded her for so long.